We're now going to go overseas and turn to the war in the Middle East. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, the death toll in Gaza has now surpassed 20,000 people. President Biden called that death toll, quote, tragic. And it comes as Israel now signals it is ready for another humanitarian pause in the fighting to try to bring more hostages home. One of Hamas's top leaders is actually in Egypt now. He's meeting with officials there to discuss that possible ceasefire. Let's bring in ABC News' Inez de la Qatar in Tel Aviv. Inez, let's start with that shocking, terribly tragic figure. 20,000 people now dead in Gaza since October 7th, according to the Hamas-run ministry. How critical is a humanitarian pause right now, and is that number resonating where you are in Israel?
Yeah, Terry, I mean, an incredibly tragic, grim milestone there. Over 20,000 people who have now died since the beginning of the war, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. It's part of the reason you are seeing growing calls for a ceasefire around the world. It's part of the reason the Americans have pressured Israel to move to a next phase of the war that would be a smaller, more targeted phase in the war. They want to see kind of targeted raids there happening. They don't want to see the same type of indiscriminate bombing, which is what President Biden has called it, in the south that happened in the north. They don't want to see a repeat in the south of what happened in the north, but the death toll continuing to climb. The humanitarian situation on the ground also incredibly dire. We know people are going hungry. We've seen those images of long lines of people waiting for bread, for food, for basic necessities. And the medical situation, the healthcare situation also incredibly dire, with hospitals, of course, on the brink of collapse. Some have already stopped functioning, and over 335,000 cases of skin and infectious diseases reported just in the last few days, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. And they actually think that number is much higher. That's just the number of people who are coming in to report these diseases. And of course, this comes as, people have been displaced, 1.8 million people who have been displaced, who are now living in close quarters, in overcrowded shelters, as the winter drags on. And so there are concerns that those diseases could spread.
Right, it's just a humanitarian catastrophe, whatever one thinks of the justice of this war. So, a ceasefire, is it likely? And is this sort of moving in the direction of what the Americans want, which is just tone down the fighting? If you've got more cleaning up of Hamas to do it, but not pounding it into rubble as happened in the north. Do you think that's part of what's happening, or is it just get the hostages home?
Yes, I mean, I think there's a little bit of both. Certainly, we saw Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in the region just a few days ago pushing for that next phase of the war. And at the same time, we are seeing growing pressure on the Israeli government to do more to bring the hostages home, specifically in the aftermath, after we learned of those 3 hostages who were accidentally killed by IDF forces. That prompted all sorts of protests, especially here in Tel Aviv, thousands taking to the streets. The families of some of the hostages even camping out outside of the IDF's headquarters, demanding for the Israelis to do more to bring their loved ones back. So we did hear from the Israeli President Isaac Herzog saying that Israel could be open to a second pause in the fighting to secure the release of more hostages, to allow for more humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. He says it's essentially now up to Hamas and specifically to Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, to decide whether to accept their offer. Basically, there are reports, and these are unconfirmed reports at this point, but there are reports that Israel is offering a week-long ceasefire in exchange for 40 hostages. And they are discussing, reportedly, releasing the remaining women, elderly men, and hostages who are sick or who have been severely injured. And Hamas, like you mentioned off the top there, so the leader of Hamas, Haniyeh, is in Cairo meeting with Egyptian intelligence officials there. And on the flip side, we also know that the head of the Israeli intelligence service, the CIA director, Bill Burns, and the Qatari prime minister met in Europe, in Warsaw, to also kind of restart these negotiations. So there does appear to be momentum, or at least a willingness to on both sides to maybe restart some form of deal here.
All right, well, we certainly hope so. And I want to ask, Inez, we see these caravans, 40 trucks carrying commercial goods crossed into the Gaza Strip for the first time since the war has started. There's been humanitarian aid coming, but these are commercial goods now. Given the epic scale of destruction, and how impactful are these goods to the people of Gaza?
They're important. They're important. They're still important. This is when we talk about commercial goods. These trucks are carrying things like flour, like oil, so basic necessities that people need to cook. So that's on top of the humanitarian aid, medical supplies that have been going in, but certainly things that are going to bring people a little bit of relief. We know specifically the commercial goods are coming in through the Kerem Shalom border crossing. So that's that second crossing that opened just a few days ago at the request of the U.S. To allow for more aid to get in on top of the Rafah border crossing. So the hope is, I think ideally that they'd be able to double the number of trucks getting in. And we are starting to see the number of trucks getting in slowly climbing again. So I think that's a little bit of good news, but it's still just a drop of in the ocean in terms of what's needed.
Wow. All right. Well, Inez de la Qatar, we are really thankful that you are there continuing to report this story. Thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.